All right, as people are signing in, I'll just make a couple of announcements. One is that this will be an interactive session. Andy and Carrie will be using Poll Everywhere to get your feedback over some of the topics that they're discussing. So if you have a smart device near you and can open a browser, or just open a browser on the computer you're currently using to access this session, we'll give you a URL during the demo, and you can participate in those polls. The other is, because there are quite a few people who are logging into the session, we have muted everybody to limit distractions and background noise. But if you do have a question, please feel free to hit the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom window, which will open our chat window, and you can type any questions in there. And Carrie and Andy will be answering questions as we go along, and they have a Q&A session usually at the end of these. And the third and final announcement is that Tech Tuesday is going to be taking a brief break during July for 2 weeks, but we'll be back in mid-July with some new topics that a lot of you have suggested to us. So we're just kind of reworking our schedule to bring you what we hope are some really cool and interesting sessions. One of which actually will be predatory publishing, again, from our library folks. So if you're interested in those, keep an eye out for our emails, and we'll have all the registration details ready for those. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Carrie and Andy. Thanks, guys, for joining us today.
All right, thank you so much, Vanessa. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Tech Tuesday presentation on Advanced PubMed. So I'm Carrie Jedlicka. I'm the Clinical Medical Librarian Intern here at the Samuel J. Wood Library, and I'm joined by Andy Hickner, who is our Education and Outreach Librarian. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next slide, please. All right, so these are our learning outcomes for today. By the end of today's session, you should be able to apply Boolean operators to combine search terms, understand how to create a search string using Advanced Search Builder, describe the concepts of MESH, or medical subject headings, and automatic term mapping, apply MESH terms to a basic search, and answer clinical questions quickly using clinical queries. That one is a bit of a tongue twister. So this workshop assumes that most of our participants have some experience with PubMed, as we're exploring some of the more advanced concepts. Next slide, please. All right, so this is our plan for today. We're going to begin with slides to introduce the concepts, and then we'll move into a demo in PubMed. And we'll be using live polling to help you check your knowledge. And we'll leave plenty of time at the end to answer your questions. Feel free at any point to type questions in the chat box at any time during the session, and maybe Vanessa and Andy can help me remember to check in on those questions. Next slide, please. All right, so we are using Poll Everywhere today, so please join us at the URL provided, which is www.pollev.com/Andy Hickner. If possible, we recommend using your desktop computer browser rather than your phone, because it will work better with one of our poll questions if you can do it on your desktop. So we'll give everyone a couple seconds to hopefully get set up here. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and move into the icebreaker? All right, so please weigh in with your vote. Which topics in today's sessions are you most interested in learning? And feel free to choose more than one. Oh, great. Let's see, it looks like someone is asking to share the website. Vanessa, are you able to put that in the chat?
Oh, sure, yes, I can.
Thank you. All right, great. So you can also select other if there's something else you'd like to learn. And if you do that, please put it in the chat. Great, thank you, Vanessa. Okay, so this is great. We've got a real variety of interests here. Looks like advanced search filter and mesh and automatic term mapping are the most popular topics, but we will address all of these. And Vanessa, Andy, please feel free to let me know if people mention other topics as well in the chat. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. All right, so a quick refresher, what is PubMed? So PubMed is a free search engine which is maintained by the US government to find biomedical literature. And PubMed searches Medline, which is a large index of biomedical journals. Next slide, please. Okay, so where we left off. So last week in our basic PubMed workshop, we explored some of the more essential tasks. We looked at conducting a basic search, accessing full text, how to use filters to refine a search, and using display options to format your search results, and also how to create an NCBI account to save a search. Next slide, please. So today, these are the tools that we are going to be looking at. And these are the tools that will really help you build search strings in PubMed. You can often find pretty good results using basic search tools. This workshop will provide a few more tools for your tool belt to help make your searches more comprehensive and find more targeted results. So next slide, please. Great. So let's get started with Boolean operators. You may have learned about Boolean operators when you learned to search a library catalog. So these are simple words that can be used to combine, include, or exclude search terms in PubMed. And the operators that are recognized by PubMed are and, or, and not. And please remember that you need to enter them all in uppercase letters for PubMed to be able to interpret the operator correctly. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start with or. So we use or to retrieve citations, which include at least one of our search terms. So using or can be useful when you are looking for articles on similar topics. So as our Venn diagram illustrates, if you want to do a search on burns or burn care, you are going to retrieve citations that have any of these terms. So burns, burn care, and also citations that include both burns and burn care. Next slide, please. So next we have and. So we use and when we want to find citations that contain all of our search terms. So we often use and when we're combining different concepts in our search. So in this search on burns and pain management, PubMed will only retrieve citations that include both these terms, burns and pain management. You should also note that and is the default operator in PubMed, so it will be automatically inserted between your search terms if you don't enter another Boolean operator. Next slide, please. All right, and then finally we come to not. So we can use not to exclude a search term, but you should use not with caution as you may end up excluding relevant articles. I don't use not a lot when I'm searching, but I do some literature searches for the burn unit here at NYP. And it seems to come about that the search term burnout seems to find its way into my search results on burns. So I often include not burnout in my search strings. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we wanted to introduce you to the concept of nesting. So nesting is the use of parentheses with Boolean operators. So these parentheses change the order in which search terms are processed. The search terms inside the parentheses are processed as a unit and then are incorporated into the overall search strategy. So as you can see in our example at the bottom, we have two concepts that we're searching for. One being burns or burn care, and the other being anesthesia or sedation. So with the use of parentheses, PubMed knows to search for these two different units combined with the and operator. Next slide, please. Okay, if nesting seems a little bit complicated, don't worry about it. Today we are going to look at the PubMed Advanced Search Builder, which is a very useful tool. It can help you build searches using Boolean operators and nesting, and the builder will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So we're going to look at this later on in our demo. So next slide, please. Okay, so please open up your Poll Everywhere. And to test your knowledge, let's do this polling question. So a student is conducting a literature search on women and myocardial infarctions, AKA heart attacks. So which combination of search terms and Boolean operators is the best fit for her search? So choose from our options below, A, B, or C.
And Carrie, I'll advance whenever you are
Gotcha.
ready to see responses.
Okay, I would say, oh, we have 10 results, 11. Okay, why don't we go ahead and take a look, see what people are saying. Ah, all right. Do we have any, let's see, will it keep updating or is this?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Okay. All right, I'll give people a few more seconds. Okay, let's move on and we'll discuss the correct choice here. Okay, great job, you guys. So most of you got the correct answer. So the first choice, choice A, is the correct answer. So with this search string, PubMed will pull citations that either include the search term heart attack or myocardial infarction, and it will include the concept of women. So that's the correct answer. The choice number 2, or B, is a little bit tricky. So essentially, if we use choice B, we are only going to pull citations that include both search terms, heart attack and myocardial infarction. So we don't need both of them, we just need one of them. So potentially, if you went with choice B, you might be missing out on some papers that only say myocardial infarction but don't mention heart attack. Hopefully that makes sense. But that one is a little bit tricky. But great job, most of you guys got the correct answer, and nobody fell into the trap of using choice C. So very good.
All right. Thanks, Carrie. This is Andy. I will be taking over for the next session, which is going to be MESH, or medical subject headings. So MESH are the controlled vocabulary used by Medline, which is the main database that PubMed searches. And it's the controlled vocabulary that Medline uses to index articles and books. So your next question is probably, what's a controlled vocabulary? A controlled vocabulary is a list of terms that are designed to make it easier to find things that are on the same topic, even if the authors use different wording. MESH searches synonyms and related concepts, so you don't have to type every variation out. MESH are assigned to each article by trained human indexers who have read the article. Understanding how MESH works can be very useful when you're searching PubMed because it can help you get better search results, and it also helps you troubleshoot when you're not seeing what you expect to in your search results. And if there's anybody here who's experienced in PubMed, I'm sure there are a lot of you are in searching this database. I'm sure you've had those times when you didn't really understand why you were or weren't getting what you expected to. So one thing to know about MESH is that there is a lag in indexing articles. It's typically 3 months or longer. Sometimes it's even as long as 6 months. So the very newest articles in PubMed often don't yet have MESH assigned. As we discussed in last week's PubMed Basics, nowadays there's a lot of content in PubMed that's not indexed in Medline. So an increasing number of PubMed articles will never be indexed with MESH. So let's talk a little bit about automatic term mapping. You can take advantage of using MESH without using the MESH thesaurus. PubMed automatically maps your search terms when you do a search. So what this means is automatic term mapping compares terms from your search query with MESH terms, journal titles, and authors in that order. So it starts with, first it looks for a MESH, then it looks for any matching journal titles, then it looks for any authors that match. So once it finds a match, it stops mapping. If no match is found, PubMed will break apart a phrase until it finds a match. Automatic term mapping can help make your searches more comprehensive, expanding your search terms, including alternate spellings, etc. It only occurs if you don't use quotes, tags, or asterisks in your search terms. To see how PubMed interprets your search, go to the advanced search page, and Carrie will show you how to get there in the demo. Let's pause for a minute just to check to see if there are any questions. Okay. Any questions before we move on to the demo? Okay. Again, we'll have plenty of time for questions in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the session.
All right.
Okay. And Carrie, you're able to take over screen share now?
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
All right, so bear with me one moment, please. Okay, so everybody can see my screen, I hope?
Yep.
I can, yes.
Excellent, thank you. So here's our demo. As a reminder, when you are searching PubMed, you want to start on the Weill Cornell Medicine Library homepage. And that is so you can see our link to PubMed, which is going to connect you to see all the resources that we have available electronically through Weill Cornell Medicine. So you go down to Popular e-resources and click here. All right, so let's start with a very simple search using some Boolean operators and nesting. Let's say I want to do a search on skin cancer in the pediatric population. I could type in a search like skin cancer. Oops, why did I go down here? Skin cancer. Oh, sorry, my screen seems to be jumping around a little bit. Okay, no matter. So skin cancer, and we said pediatrics. That would be one way to do this search. Maybe I'd also like to include the search term children to see if that's going to pull up more search results. So if I want to do that, I need to do some very simple nesting. I'm putting these terms in parentheses to identify that this is one unit, a separate concept that we're searching for in addition to skin cancer. So let me run the search. And then let's take a look and see how our terms match, or our terms map using automatic term mapping. So we click on Advanced, and then we go to the Advanced Search Builder. And we're going to scroll down here to our history and search details, and we click on the chevron under details. All right, so this is our automatic term mapping. You can kind of skip this information at the top, which sort of looks like a jumble, but that's how PubMed interprets the search. And you can go straight to translations, which are a bit easier to read. So they've broken down our 3 search terms, and we can see that skin cancer has mapped to the mesh term skin neoplasms. So this mesh term has been included in our search, as well as PubMed has also entered skin and neoplasms as other keywords for the search as well. And then we can also see the terms that we entered skin cancer, which is broken into 2 parts here, and skin cancer. So you can see that the way that this has helped make that automatic term mapping has helped make the search more robust. If we go down to pediatrics, we see that PubMed has included an alternate spelling, so the British spelling of pediatrics. So citations with this alternate spelling will also be included in our search. We have mapped to pediatrics, which is the mesh term. And then we have some different derivations of pediatrics and pediatric using both the American and British spellings. And then finally, our search term children, it maps to the mesh term child. And then we have some different derivations here of child, children, child's, children's. So you can see how much more robust our search is now that PubMed is using automatic term mapping. So let's build a search in Advanced Search Builder. Let's say that I want to search for some articles on healthcare disparities in the LGBTQ community. So I am going to enter my search terms one by one, and I want to see how they map. So let's start with healthcare disparities. And I'm actually, instead of searching, I'm going to add to history. So they'll just pop up in the box below. That makes it a little easier to look at your mapping. And then I'm also going to put in LGBTQ. Okay, so let's take a look at healthcare disparities. Okay, so I can see that healthcare disparities actually is the mesh term for this concept. So this looks like a pretty good fit for my search. I also got quite a large number of results. If I go to LGBTQ, I see I did not get quite so many results. Let's look at the mapping here. Okay, so LGBTQ didn't actually map to anything. There's no mesh term here. This makes me think I can probably find a better term for this search if I want to get the best results. So to do that, I'm going to go to the mesh browser. So you can either go straight to the URL if you know it, or go back to the PubMed homepage. And then we scroll down, and here we have the mesh database. All right, and I'm just going to enter LGBTQ here in the box, and we'll see what we come up with. So LGBTQ mapped to sexual and gender minorities. Let's take a quick look at this page. So we have our mesh term, we have a definition, and we have the year that this mesh term was introduced, 2018. So that's pretty recently. Over here on the right, we have the PubMed search builder if we want to add this mesh term and run a search on it. And we also have subheadings. So if I'm interested in looking at a particular dimension of this mesh term, I can click one of those boxes and add that to the search builder. If we want to restrict this search to a major topic in mesh, that's also something that you can play around with. Down below, we have quite a long list of entry terms. This is a very long list. So essentially, these are keywords that are cross-referenced with this mesh term. So if you type in any of these terms into PubMed, they're going to map to this mesh term. So if I do a little detective work here, I see that LGBTQ on its own is not an entry term. Had I entered LGBTQ persons or person, then that would have mapped to mesh. But because I didn't type that in specifically, that's the reason it didn't map. Sometimes these entry terms can be helpful if you want to consider adding other keywords to your search. As Andy mentioned, there is a lag time with articles being indexed with mesh terms. So it's often, when I do searching, I include both a mesh term and a keyword to make sure I'm getting the most up-to-date studies. Down here, we also have previous indexing. So this includes the mesh terms that were used prior to this mesh term being introduced. We also have some related mesh terms. So these are things you could consider using in your searches. And then down below, we have a mesh hierarchy. So this shows you where this mesh term fits into the full hierarchy of mesh terms that are related to it, going from the most broad to the most narrow. Some hierarchies are much more detailed. This one is relatively small, but they can be helpful. Sometimes if you run a search using a mesh term and you're not getting very many results, you could consider looking at your hierarchy and figuring out, do I need to broaden my term? Additionally, you might decide I need to narrow down my term, and the hierarchy might be helpful in that way. So just things to consider with your searching. All right, so let's add this mesh term to the search builder and search in PubMed. Okay, so now let's go back to our advanced search builder and start building the search. All right, so first of all, I want to combine my mesh term and my keyword. As I mentioned, I'm using the mesh and I'm using the keyword to make sure I'm getting the most up-to-date articles on this topic. So to do so, I go to Actions, and I'm gonna add query. So you can see this popped up in the box above. And then I'm gonna add LGBTQ, and I'm going to add it with the OR operator. So PubMed needs to search for either of these terms. And now I need to add my second concept, which is healthcare disparities. So I go to Actions, and I'm going to add this with the AND operator. So you can see up here that the search builder has done some nesting for us. So you don't need to worry about that. It's all taken care of. And then let's add to history and see how this looks. Okay, so we've got 369. Let's take a look at our search results. Okay, so if I scroll through some of these citations, I can see that I already right at the top have some articles that look like they're a pretty good fit for the search on healthcare disparities in the LGBTQ communities. So this looks like a good starting place for my search. So finally, so we've looked at, so here we looked at the advanced search builder and mesh. Let's take a quick look at one other search tool, which is clinical queries. So to get there, we're going to go back to the PubMed homepage, and under Find, we see clinical queries. So clinical queries is a search tool which is specifically targeted to searching for clinical research questions. So if you type in a research topic here, you're actually going to get results in all three of these categories: clinical studies, systematic reviews, and medical genetics. So say I'm interested in studying like postpartum depression. I type in the term, and it's going to bring up articles related to clinical research. And as you can see in some of these categories, there are also filters. If you want to specify a certain topic, say we want to look at diagnosis of postpartum depression. And you can also use this filter to make the scope either broad or narrow. And you see for each of these areas, I think they usually include 5 citations on this page, but down below there's a link where you can look at more of the results. So this is just a helpful tool for you to use when you are looking at clinical research questions. If you're doing a broader, more comprehensive search, PubMed would be the place to look, but this is another resource for clinical questions. And this brings us to the end of our demo. Do we have any questions that I can answer?
Stephen Pon asks, if a term was introduced in 2018, what do you do if you are looking for older articles? Carrie, do you feel comfortable fielding this question?
Sure, I will. I'm actually going to go back to the search we were looking at before, and I'm gonna, Andy, feel free to jump in here, but I'll tell you what I might do. So before we were looking at LGBTQ, which we mentioned was a very recent concept, it's, maybe 2 years old. depending on the article that, depending on how in-depth the search you're doing, you could consider going down to previously indexed and taking a look at some of these mesh terms. You would need to, kind of see if these fit your topic. But we have, a recent mesh term would be bisexuality. So you could click on that and add it to your search builder. And in fact, you can go back to your previous search. When you start adding things in the search builder, they will just kind of accumulate there. So if you just want to try out with multiple search terms, that might be a way to go. So we see that bisexuality started in 1990 to 2016. So that might be far enough. If you want to go back further, you could try some of these other mesh terms as well. Andy, is there anything you would like to add to this?
I would just scroll up and point out if you are, so I agree with Carrie that this is a good example of when the mesh browser will come in handy because it can help you look up what the previous indexing was. One thing you want to be careful about is when you're adding the search builder, be careful which Boolean you're because you don't actually want and, we're going to want or for this. And to be honest, I don't know off the top of my head if there's, if the way that they do the indexing captures the previous indexing. I don't know if there's any kind of translation that happens. So it would be good to check your earlier. So for this search, for example, I would look at stuff that's older than 2018 to see if, just to see how it was indexed. So you can actually open up a record and scroll down to the bottom and look at the mesh and see if it's using the newer terms or the older terms. So just play around with it and be mindful that you may have to add additional terms if you're interested in capturing all of the older literature.
Right. Another thing, might be to add more key terms. That might be another thing to do. We mentioned that you often want to use some keywords with your mesh terms to kind of give you more breadth with your search. So that might be something else to consider too. Yeah, so I guess those would be some suggestions.
All right, I am going to take over again, Carrie, if that
Sure.
is okay with you. Let's see, share screen. This one. Okay, now we're back in slide mode, yes?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so now we just have a couple of closing polls to help all of you test your understanding of what we covered. It's been a little while since our last poll, so you might have to refresh this.
Yeah, it's working.
Give it a minute. Okay, great. So it's showing up for me. So this first poll is going to take us a couple of minutes because you will have to use PubMed to answer it. There are two ways you can look this up. The first is you can search for healthcare-associated infection from PubMed, then navigate to your results page, from your results page to the advanced search page that we were just looking at earlier, and click to view the search details. That part of the page that shows you how PubMed, how the automatic term mapping worked. The second way you can do this is from the PubMed homepage, navigate to the mesh browser on the lower right-hand side, which Carrie just showed us how to do, and search for the concept there. If you're totally lost, select I'm not sure, and we can review this one more time when we get to the Q&A. So we will give everybody a couple minutes to attempt this. And if you're not, interested in participating in this poll activity, just select I'm not sure, just so that we have a sense of how quickly we can move forward. I don't want to cut the poll off before everybody has a chance to attempt it who wants to. Okay, it looks like we've been, oh, we just went up to 12, 13, okay. Give it another few seconds. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the poll results. Okay. Interesting, because we're getting quite a few different. I should emphasize what we want for this. We want you to look for what's the mesh term that it's mapping to, because it might map to other fields, and we're interested in the mesh term. Okay, I'm going to move on to so we can show the answer. So the correct answer is actually cross-infection. You may actually find some of the other terms end up being incorporated into the query through the PubMed search translation, but the actual mesh term that we want for this concept is cross-infection. So this might be something, if time permits, we can show again at the end. Next one, this is another question about combining terms using Boolean operators. Which of the following can be used to combine terms using Boolean operators? There may be more than one technique. Select all that apply. Okay, I'm going to move on to our poll results. So most of you, the biggest group was Advanced Search Builder, followed by nesting. Okay, I'm seeing some answer changes here. So we're going to finally move on to the answer. And the correct answers are Advanced Search Builder and nesting. Both of these are ways that you can combine terms using Boolean operators. Automatic term mapping is more related to mesh. And mesh is more of the process of helping find all those synonyms and different ways of saying the same thing. All right. So we're almost at the end of our presentation. I wanted to take a moment to emphasize that the library faculty and staff are always available to answer any questions that you might have about PubMed. Just use those Ask Us or Chat Now links at the top of our homepage. We're available for one-on-one consultations. We can also schedule group training for your department or your lab, customized for your specific needs. Just shoot me an email or use one of those forms and we can get something on the schedule. So we will spend the rest of your time answering your questions in the chat. Please don't forget the session evaluation. It's very short. It's just 3 questions and it should only take you about a minute. And any feedback that you all can provide will really help us fine-tune the session next time that we present it. Okay, Vanessa.
We had a question.
Okay.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, Andy.
Go ahead.
Margaret asked if we can review how to do the hospital-associated infection question.
Yeah.
I go back to
exit.
mesh, or do you do it? Either way is great.
Oh, I can do it. It's probably easier since I'm already screen sharing. Okay, so the cross-infection question, thank you for that reminder. Okay, sure. Now we'll use this as a little example of a little refresher on how to, sorry everybody. So again, we're accessing PubMed from the home page. And like I said, there are two different ways we can do this. The first one is just type in healthcare associated infection from PubMed homepage. Then I go to advanced and I scroll down to see my search history. I click this little caret sign under details, and voila, this is my mesh term. And it actually says mesh terms in brackets right after that. So it's cross-infection. So that's the first way. Let's go back to the home page and I'll show you the second way. Oh, go back there. Scroll down a little bit. Our mesh database link is under Explore. Oh, and it wants me to log in, which is quite interesting. I think there's some fun things happening with the library's proxy system. Okay, so our second way to do this is I type the same term into the mesh browser. And again, it takes us directly to cross-infection. Margaret, I hope that helped answer your question. Another question I see from Shai. When would you use Ovid rather than PubMed? This is actually a great question. Ovid, you'll probably get different answers, slightly different answers to this question depending on who you ask. Ovid, for folks who are not familiar with it, is a subscription, you actually have to purchase access to Ovid. The library licenses Ovid for everyone, so if you're a member of the Weill Cornell community, you can access it. But it's just a different way to access the Medline database, which underlies PubMed. PubMed is like the free way to search Medline. Ovid is the fancy sort of subscription way to search Medline. And the reason that Ovid exists is they have all these, they have some interesting functionality that is not available in the free public version, that's not available in PubMed. There are certain things like what's called adjacency searching, where you can search for a pair of words and separated by within a certain number of words. And it just really helps you create a much more focused and complex search. And it also gives you a little bit more upfront control in how you want to use mesh and how you want your search query interpreted. So Ovid is really good for things like systematic review searching, where it's really important to have a very focused, tight search strategy without a lot of like monkey business going on behind the scenes. I would also maybe describe it as PubMed for control freaks. You use it when you really want to have a lot of control over how your search is interpreted. If anyone is interested in getting a little tutorial on how to use Ovid Medline, shoot me an email and I'd be happy to meet with you to show you that. Okay, I see that at least one person wasn't able to access our polls. I apologize for that. I hope you were still able to get something out of the session. Carrie, anything you want to add about Ovid Medline?
No, I think that is a great way to describe it. I think I've also heard that Ovid also pulls maybe from more European journals and citations. I don't have evidence to back that up, but that is something that I've heard, more so than PubMed.
There is, yeah, with Ovid, there's Ovid Medline, but there are also other Ovid databases. So I think, and I don't know how it is here at Weill Cornell, so you may be thinking of Embase.
I am, yes.
Yeah, if we license Embase through Ovid, then that would actually be true, because Embase is like a different biomedical database, which is very similar to Medline, but it's bigger and it has more international coverage. We are almost at 12:45, so if you have any additional questions, feel free to shoot them to me or to Carrie after the session. Carrie, anything else you want to add before we turn it over to Vanessa?
No, that's it. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Andy, for your work on this presentation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you both for hosting the session today. We really appreciate it. And just so everybody on the session knows, this session is recorded. So I'm just going to do some light video editing to make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to host it online and I'll send it to you. I believe by the end of the day, but latest tomorrow morning, as well as some helpful links that Carrie and Andy provided me earlier. So I'll make sure that gets to you so that if you have any questions, you can refer to these links, or you can contact Andy and Carrie when you have a chance. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, great rest of the day. And thanks again to Carrie and Andy for hosting the session.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.